Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues from a Catholic perspective. I'm Catherine Seltner in our Washington, D.C. studio. Here's what we have planned for you in this show. We address Iceland's alarming attempt to eradicate children with Down syndrome. Belgium's Brothers of Charity continues to perform euthanasia despite a warning from Pope Francis. And a woman with a very rare disease works to protect the most vulnerable. But first, our top story, President Donald Trump is reportedly poised to unravel the so-called contraceptive mandate put into place by former President Barack Obama. The mandate forces companies to provide contraception and abortion-causing drugs and health insurance plans. The Wall Street Journal reports the Trump administration is on the verge of implementing a new rule similar to one that leaked online earlier this year. The leaked draft would roll back the attack on conscience protection and would give relief to groups with a religious or moral objection to the contraceptive mandate. Joining us now is Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List, and Monty Alvarado is executive director of Beckett, a religious liberty law firm representing the Little Sisters of the Poor and EWTN. Thank you both for being here.
So glad to be here, Catherine.
Thank you
for having us.
Can you each underline the importance of updating the contraceptive mandate?
Well, I think I'd like to address the speed with which it should be happening, and it hasn't been so far. We've been working with the administration since before the inaugural on this. And, you know, right now it's just in no man's land. And for every day that that happens, another right is ignored. And I think we should be a little bit impatient. I think they need to hear from us. These are our friends, these are our allies, but you know, even friends can be a little bit slow in the uptake, and we owe it to each other to communicate now, I think, to the administration and say, hey, now's time. We need that.
Monty?
Definitely, and I mean, we had some wonderful promises in the Rose Garden that we know about. Trump talking to the Little Sisters, saying that their case was finally over. So it's really up to DOJ to provide that two-pronged relief, to release a new rule and to either drop these cases or give up this fight. And there's some real consequences here that are affecting all of us and all of our organizations. There was a case in the Third Circuit that was just like the Little Sisters case, a group that had a moral objection, not an actual religious objection to the mandate, and they lost their case. They have to participate in this. And this is a crisis pregnancy center. This isn't just some random place that is easily cornered as any type of objector. It's a moral objector. So Susan B. Anthony, March for Life, these great organizations and pro-life organizations that we love would have to participate in this mandate.
We asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the White House press secretary, about this months ago, back in April. At the time, she was the principal deputy White House press secretary, but this is what she had to say about updating the contraceptive mandate.
Look, the president's made no secret that health care reform and certainly repealing and replacing Obamacare is one of his top priorities. That's something that he and his administration and the team are working on constantly, day in, day out, and we hope to see that get finished and completed here in the coming weeks. And we don't have a set timetable, but we do hope that that happens soon, and it certainly remains a top priority for the president.
It's been about 4 months since that came out. What's going on?
I have to say that we check in almost daily, and so the non-answer, it's not that I think that there won't be a good result. I actually do think that's happening. The concern that I have is that the longer that it sits, the more buried it'll get with legislation coming up when they all come back to Congress again. So it really needs to happen before the end of August, or it's going to be even longer that redress that we get redress for our rights being taken away.
Absolutely. This is that moment for truth and healing. It's that moment for the Department of Justice to follow the lead that was placed by the president and the vice president when they said that they were pro-life. It's the moment for them to say that this was a mistake and that we do have rights of conscience, and to follow those promises.
We need to hold them accountable. Thank you both. And we're going to turn now to the next pro-life story. CBS News recently reported Iceland has virtually eliminated new cases of Down syndrome, but the truth is Iceland is eliminating people with Down syndrome. The Nordic nation uses prenatal testing and abortion to systematically exterminate children with the condition. The president of the National Down Syndrome Society tells EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, Down syndrome is not a disease.
We know that people with Down syndrome are reaching their full potential in all areas of life. They're graduating alongside their peers, they're attending post-secondary education, pursuing employment opportunities, getting married, and doing the same thing that you and I are doing every single day.
The United States exterminates 67% of babies diagnosed with Down syndrome, according to CBS News. Marjorie, as a pro-life leader, what do you make of this report that Iceland is eliminating Down syndrome?
Well, as a pro-life leader, but also a mother with a child with disabilities, I'm in this world and I love these children who add so much. The whole term special needs is really kind of an interesting one because we all have those, right? So France is 77% extermination rate, let's just call it that, only 77%. 77% are aborted. And in France, your speech is even limited or censored. They censored a beautiful video on a day to acknowledge all people with Downs. France said, no way, you can't put that ad on television because it'll make women who've made that legal choice feel very uncomfortable. Now, if you took that, every legal choice, and we can't make people feel uncomfortable to its natural extension, we would never be able to fight human rights abuses anywhere. Because if it was legal, well, then it must be okay. There's clearly something that we all know, something beautiful in these children, and the mothers and anybody who knows them knows that. So this really is a tragedy.
Absolutely. Every life is a gift. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Conscience protection in our healthcare is a huge priority for ensuring we as pro-lifers can live out our beliefs. The so-called contraceptive mandate put into place by former President Barack Obama forces companies to provide contraception and abortion-causing drugs and health insurance plans. Earlier this year, there was a new updated draft of this mandate that would roll back that attack on conscience protection and would give relief to the Little Sisters of the Poor and other pro-life groups like EWTN with a religious or moral objection. But the Trump administration has not yet moved forward on this update. Now is the time for them to act. And with that, we go to this week's call to action. If you believe groups like the Little Sisters of the Poor and even non-religious groups who have moral objections should be free to live out their faith and morality without a breach in conscience, go to your computer or smartphone right now, open up your web browser, and type in prolifeweekly.com. Once you arrive to the website, simply type in your name, your email address, and click Add My Name. That's it. By doing this, you are telling the Trump administration to move forward with updating the so-called contraceptive mandate rule. This would give relief to the Little Sisters, EWTN, and all organizations that have a religious or moral objection to providing contraception and abortion-inducing drugs and devices. The president needs to fulfill the promise he made earlier this year that this ordeal will soon be over. Once again, go to prolifeweekly.com to speak up for conscience rights in defense of life. Pope Francis is cracking down on a Belgian Catholic charity performing euthanasia. The Holy Father has given the Brothers of Charity group until the end of August to stop offering euthanasia to patients at its 15 psychiatric hospitals in Belgium. The Brothers of Charity is the group running the psychiatric centers and is mainly made up of lay people. Each of the religious brothers serving on the board has been ordered to sign a joint letter with the General Superior declaring adherence to church teaching. The Brothers of Charity group is expected to face legal action and have its Catholic status revoked if it does not rescind its euthanasia policy. We are joined now by Monsignor Renzo Pegoraro from Rome. He is Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy for Life and a bioethicist. Monsignor, thank you for your time.
Thank you. It is a pleasure.
These hospitals we are discussing were founded by the Brothers of Charity, but the religious brothers involved with them are allegedly reducing quickly. Do these institutions qualify as Catholic anymore? And Monsignor, can you reiterate what the Catholic Church teaches about euthanasia?
But the Church is reconfirming the teaching of no euthanasia. That is not a way to help the patients, the people that have a problem of pain or suffering, and the real mercy and compassion is to offer good care, and we are supporting as a church the palliative care, respecting more the dignity and the life of each person, each patient.
Monsignor, if the Brothers of Charity group does not stop performing euthanasia, what action do you believe Pope Francis should take?
as an academy, we are not competent. We have not competency for some problems inside the congregation. And of course, it is important to clarify some misunderstanding, because the teaching and the work of the church is supporting life, to offer good care, and of course avoid euthanasia or avoid form of abandonment or not good care for the patients.
Monsignor, the charity announced in May it would permit euthanasia if the patients were in a state of unbearable suffering. Why is this idea of euthanasia for the suffering a dangerous one? What does the church say about suffering?
It's a little strange to talk to explain until now the idea of unbearable suffering, because we have treatments and approaches to manage this kind of suffering.
Monsignor, I want to get your take on this next story. Herman Van Rompuy is a board member linked to the Brothers of Charity congregation. He is a former Belgian prime minister, a prominent figure. And in response to this contested euthanasia decision, he tweeted out a phrase meaning the time of Rome has spoken, the case is closed, is long past. Do you take that as a sign of defiance to the Vatican?
I hope no, because and of course, if there are some misunderstanding or not good communication, particularly inside the Congregation of Brothers of Charity, it is important to clarify and to avoid confusion or tensions.
Other than Belgium, where else are we seeing a rise of euthanasia? What else is on your radar?
I think that there is not a right of euthanasia, but we know that in Belgium, Netherlands, and a few states also in the United States, there is a legislation that permits in some condition this practice. But it is really dangerous and not respecting the human dignity and especially the vulnerable people and patients. And we need to stress more good care for everybody, good palliative care, and to support the patient till the end of his or her life, and not to provoke the death of the patients.
Absolutely. Monsignor Renzo Pecoraro, thank you again for your time and for speaking with us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for your work.
We did reach out to the Superior General of the Brothers of Charity for comment. We were told no one can comment at this time, and the religious group is waiting in silence for the next step. Chile ends its ban on abortion, a success for President Michelle Bachelet. Chile's Constitutional Court voted 6-4 on Monday in favor of legalizing abortions in particular cases, including when a woman's life is in danger, when the preborn baby is considered not viable, and in cases of rape. Until now, Chile had been the only country in South America to ban abortion in all circumstances since 1989. That child wants to live. Those are some of the lyrics to the song you're hearing right now. It's called A Song of Love from the Chilean group Movimiento Reivindica, and it was used during recent pro-life demonstrations protesting the legalization of abortion in the country. A federal appeals court ruled Arkansas can legally block Medicaid funding to Planned Parenthood. Governor Asa Hutchinson ended the state's Medicaid contract with the abortion giant in 2015 after undercover Planned Parenthood videos came to light, leading to a court battle over funding. This decision could potentially lead up to a fight in the U.S. Supreme Court over efforts by Arkansas and other states to defund Planned Parenthood. Oregon Governor Kate Brown last week signed a sweeping pro-abortion bill into law. The state will now offer free abortions up to birth for citizens and illegal immigrants. The law allocates $10.2 million from Oregon's general fund to expand abortion coverage throughout the state. Pro-lifers note this will force taxpayers who morally oppose abortion to assume some of the costs. About 12% of women between the ages of 15 and 44 struggle with conceiving children in the United States. That's according to the Centers for Disease Control, and a reminder that infertility hits home for many families. Our next guest has thoughtful advice for those families and shares what they should know about in vitro fertilization before wanting to try it. Elizabeth Kirk is a lawyer, a writer, and an adoptive mother of 4. Elizabeth, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You have been very open about your struggles with infertility. Why did you opt to not go the in vitro fertilization route? And what would you like to share with our viewers who might be considering that?
You know, there are a lot of reasons. It's complicated. I think a main reason that we chose not to pursue IVF is that it's not a cure for infertility. It's not a treatment for infertility. It doesn't help you with future pregnancies. It doesn't prevent miscarriage. If a woman is unable, or a couple are unable to conceive and bear a child, then that means there's something medically wrong. And IVF is just a Band-Aid. You know, it doesn't address that underlying condition. And so what we chose to pursue was a form of medical treatment that looked at me as a whole person rather than just a means to an object, the child.
Right.
So I think that first and foremost what I would want people to know is simply that if you're not able to get pregnant, there's probably something wrong. And for me, I thought, even if I conceive, I want to be a healthy person for that child, or even if I don't conceive, right? I mean, and so there could be, you know, our bodies are not these kind of systems of unrelated parts, right? Your reproductive system is related to your cardiovascular system, is related to your endocrine, they're all interrelated. And so it was something that was very important to me to be treated as a whole person as I was pursuing this medical treatment.
And the church does oppose IVF, of course.
So in addition, yes, there are serious moral and ethical concerns, I think, that by themselves would be, you know, reason for serious pause. For example, IVF, just the kind of system of IVF generally involves a form of eugenics, right? You want to pick the best embryo to implant. It can involve abortion, selective reduction if too many embryos implant, et cetera. So in order to avoid some of those things, IVF wasn't really on the table for us. It's also, frankly, not that successful. The rate, I think it was from 2012, 2013, the overall rate of live births is something like 29.4%, and it goes down with age. So if you're over 42, the rate of live births through IVF is something like 3.9%.
So in addition to these ethical and moral dilemmas, it's also expensive and emotionally traumatizing.
Exactly.
So Elizabeth, then what would you share with couples who are struggling with infertility and won't go the IVF route? How should they deal with that suffering? What practical advice do you have?
Well, first, I would say to get good medical care. Again, IVF is a Band-Aid. It doesn't treat the underlying condition. So I would say, you know, try to find a doctor who looks at you as a whole person, who looks at you and your husband as human beings rather than a means to obtain a child. Aside from medical care, I would strongly urge couples to really protect their marriage. I think, you know, oftentimes as Catholics we talk about how contraception is sort of you objectify your spouse as a means to pleasure. With infertility treatments, even if they're moral, you can start to objectify your spouse as a means to a child. And I think it's really important to protect your marriage and to be mindful of that.
Speaking of marriage, all marriages are called to be fruitful, even if that is not in the biological sense that we're so used to hearing and seeing. How else can marriages be fruitful?
I had a professor once who spoke about marriage as creating that the man and woman coming together in marriage, they create a space, right? They create a space for others. And the natural way in which we think of this is the biological child. But regardless of whether you can conceive and bear biological children, marriages are called to do that, to provide a space for others. That can be through biological children, it can be through foster and adoption, it can be through the pursuit of careers that might be incompatible with children but yet serve humanity. It can be through the care of the elderly and the poor. Pope John Paul has written quite beautifully about the ways in which marriages ought to be. I mean, the key thing to remember is your marriage is called to be fruitful. It may not be called to be fruitful through biological children.
Elizabeth Kirk, thank you for your openness and for your insight.
Thank you.
When we come back,
what's really threatening the disability community is these physician-assisted suicide laws.
meet a woman who lets nothing get in her way when it comes to defending life. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Seltner. The president of Planned Parenthood uses her social media platform to spread misconceptions about pro-lifers yet again, and we are speaking out against it. In an Instagram post this week, Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards writes, "Reports are that the Trump administration is going to repeal the birth control benefit. Since millions of women will now not be able to afford birth control, we are thinking of bringing back the rhythm meter, circa 1944. The post, mocking in tone, continues on. Yes, my friends, this is what women used before birth control was legal and available. To claim the rhythm method is the alternative to birth control pro-lifers are advocating for is not true. For people who oppose contraception for moral, religious, or for health reasons, natural family planning is the fertility awareness method often used. NFP is not the rhythm method. The rhythm or calendar method assumes each woman's body works in the same way with the same timing. It is often very inaccurate. NFP, on the other hand, treats each woman as unique. It is based on day-to-day observations and is very effective in helping a couple understand the woman's fertility. Mrs. Richards, do not assume every woman wants to take hormonal contraceptives to change how her body is naturally supposed to work. As a woman, my fertility is a sign of health. It's not something I want to get rid of or mess with. No, that is not pro-woman. That is not empowering. And frankly, Mrs. Richards, your post is misinformative and denies your long list of followers the opportunity to hear about a real choice in their fertility. Remember, there is something you can do to counter today's culture of death. Follow this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com and tell President Trump to roll back the contraceptive mandate. In some uplifting news, 2 Latin American nations celebrated children this past weekend. People in both Argentina and Peru joined together in activities dedicated to kids. From fun tech games to playing soccer with well-known teams, Dia del Niño celebrated both children who are born and those not yet quite born. Children's Day was established as a national holiday after World War II, and in 1954, the United Nations suggested dedicating a universal day to celebrate children's wellness and rights. It's custom in many countries, and last weekend was Argentina and Peru's turn. Julie Hawker is a successful woman. She has her MBA and is a public advocate for the pro-life cause. Hawker also happens to have a rare genetic disease. It doesn't define her, but it does fuel her work even more. Here's this week's Pro-Life Focus.
I often forget how little I am. I see myself in photos, and then I remember.
Julie Hawker may be little by typical standards, but she is a force to be reckoned with. Hawker was born with osteogenesis imperfecta, commonly known as brittle bone disease.
It essentially means that my bones are made differently. So as I was woven in the womb, my bones came out weak. It has to do with collagen, and it essentially means that throughout my life, I've had well over 100 broken bones, a bunch of surgeries, and I physically can't walk.
Though rare, Hawker's disability doesn't hold her back.
I drive and go to work full time. I think I lead a pretty average life here in the Washington, D.C. area.
She's graduated with a Master in Business Administration and serves as a senior fellow for the Center for Human Dignity at the American Conservative Union. It's an opportunity that allows her to speak boldly in defense of life.
And on the matters of life and human dignity, on the matter of life, we cannot be wrong.
When you meet Julie, you quickly forget about her disability, maybe because she doesn't let it define her.
The first way that I would describe myself is as a Christian. A conservative and a daughter and a sister and an aunt all come after calling myself a Christian.
It's that faith in Christ that's helped Hawker with the very real health challenges she's faced.
I look at some of the darkest days that I've had laying in the hospital and having many broken bones or waking up from a long surgery. And you look and you say, what's the one thing that's been steady and constant? And for me, it's really been the presence of God and the gift of Jesus Christ.
Her Christian beliefs also shape how she views each person, with an innate value worthy of defending. But Julie believes that individual worth is under attack in our culture of death, which is why she says the biggest threat facing the disability community today isn't narrow doorways or entrances without ramps. It's assisted suicide laws.
How do you differentiate the suffering of someone who is confronting ALS or cancer versus the suffering that maybe someone with osteogenesis imperfecta like me might face when they're having one of their more significant surgeries or are recovering from an accident? We certainly don't believe that people with disabilities should ever be told that they're better off dead.
Hawker's life and work is a testimony to the world. The dignity of human life belongs to everyone, no matter what they look like.
We should continue to look at each other as holistic beings that deserve the guardianship and protection of each other.
It's a conclusion Julie is getting to more quickly than the rest of the world. That's it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. You can reach us anytime at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com. I look forward to hearing from you and to seeing you here again next week. Remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.